man can remain joyful all year round without watching a single comedy, because this kind of great joy that is even therapeutic to the flesh can only be found in God. It's a gift. David says, "You have put gladness in my heart." Everyone who walks with God will see God working in their hearts this way. If you do not want to get to that point where you really get stressed about life, then start building a relationship with God today. You are welcome to another episode of Logos, where our hearts are transformed by the revelation of Christ. This is a walk through the Psalms, episode 15. We will be concluding our discussion in Psalm 4 today by looking at Psalm 4 from verse 5 to 8. Let us read from verse 5. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. There are many who say, "Who will show us any good?" Lord, lift up the light of your countenance upon us. You have put gladness in my heart, more than in the season that there are grain and wine increased. I will both lie down in peace and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. The background to these Psalms, once again, is similar to that of Psalm 3, because they both show us that at this point in time, the psalmist, who is David, was actually going through some difficult circumstances, life-threatening issues. Now, in summary, before we look at what we need to talk about today, the life of David and his inclination towards God tells us that when things are tough, God is still the one we must turn to. Now, we said that in the last episode, and we still have reasons to talk about that today. So let's look at it from verse 5. It says, "Offer the sacrifice of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord." That is the concluding expression that David was giving to those who are oppressing him. Because you will notice that he started talking to them from verse 2, verse 3, verse 4, and verse 5. So he gave admonition to the oppressors, he gave admonitions to them, and Evans told them in verse 4 that they should not let anger take them over or determine what they are doing. They should not allow emotion to control them. The next thing he said is, "Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord." Sacrifice is the central part. When people talk about sacrifice, while at times it is given as a sin offering, but many times also it's an expression of worship and dedication to the Lord. So when a man brings an animal, according to what is stipulated by the Lord, they are not just giving animals. They are actually giving those animals as a token of devotion and dedication to the Lord. Okay, but here David is saying to this set of people who are living wrongly and are persecuting him, he says to them, offer the sacrifices of righteousness. So that means that beyond what you can give as a physical offering, there is much more to what pleases God than just your gifts. So living right, following his will and trusting him in all ways is what pleases God more than the sacrifice. And Bible says obedience is better than sacrifice, and that's what I'm talking about. That act of worship is more important to God than the gift you render to him as a form of worship. Why that is important? But for God, the act from which that is coming is more important. And he told them to put their trust in the Lord. Now, what we are seeing is still going to be clearer as we go on in these verses. But he told them to put their trust in the Lord. Because really, if a man is going to live to please God, it must start from the place of trust. It takes trust in the Lord actually to leave all and to just sacrifice all just to please him. Because the truth of the matter is that God does not owe any man anything. And so a man's life must be predicated and founded on the trust in God if that man wants to live a righteous life. Now there is a change of tone when we get to verse 6. Look at what he said in verse 6. There are many who say, who will show us any good? That is quite instructive because David is here telling us what is going on around him. Remember what I just read. Verses, the first sentence is, there are many who say, who will show us any good? That suggests an expression of despair, an expression of hopelessness, an expression of helplessness. The way God has designed humans is such that they cannot live a good life except by dependence on God. Man has his own autonomy in that sense. He's a free moral agent. He can choose to follow God and he might choose not to follow him. God is not going to force man to follow him. But by design, man is deficient by design. What I mean is that man was not designed according to God's original design. Man was not created to be self-sufficient. So no matter how intelligent a man is, no matter how smart and sharp he is, he's going to get to a point where his strength cannot carry him beyond. We all have to get to that point. So even if he seems to be making progress, studying out, it's only a matter of time. It's going to show. Now, it's not everyone that gets to their wit's end that show it, but every human being will always get to the limit of his strength eventually. Now, why it is wise not to get to that limit before you trust God, because God should not be your last resort. The way God has created man is so that man will be living with him every day of his life. So what David has around him is that he said there are many, and that's actually the song of many people even in our days, who will show us any good. Their heart cry is for a desire to see goodness in the land of the living. They want something good. They want their life to be delivered from whatever they are held by. Okay? Now, but David's response is quite instructive. Look at it. Lord, that is the second part of verse 6. Lord, lift up the light of your countenance upon us. Now, this is a figurative expression talking about God's approval and God's presence, God's approval, presence, or favor. That's what David is saying here. Lord, lift up the light of your countenance upon us. And so he's talking about God looking at them in favor, God showing his favor. Now, the reason this is important is this. While many people were singing songs of discouragement, while many people were griping and complaining, while many people were hopeless, David looked up to God and he sought God's favor. So David is showing us that it is not strange that you are having this kind of experience of hopelessness. That is typical of any man who wants to run his life without God. But David's own decision is instructive and we need to pay attention to it. It was God he focused on. Why many people are saying, where else will help come from? You know, that reminds us of Psalm 121 verse 1. I'll lift up my eyes to the hills. From whence comes my help? My help comes from God who makes the heavens and the earth. So what we see today is that many people in ignorance and short-sightedness, they are looking up to the mountain and to the hills. They are looking elsewhere, seeking consolation and comfort. But David is showing us by his lifestyle, even though it's an ancient way, even though it's an old way, that is the only true way. In the midst of challenges, in the midst of helplessness and hopelessness, God is still the one we turn to. That is why we cannot live our lives as if God does not exist. We must cultivate fellowship with the Lord so that in case the issues of life come our way and they are trying to hold us down, we will have built a lifestyle that trusts in God come what may. Okay, let's look at verse 7. You have put gladness in my heart. Look at this. You have put gladness in my heart. It's almost like an odd expression. In the midst of people's trouble, because verses tells us how hopeless people have been. It's more like a rhetoric. Who will show us any good? Okay? And David here is saying, you have put gladness in my... While others are cast down, while others are hopeless, David is talking about the kind of gladness that fills his heart. We're going to see very soon as we go on that this gladness is not from a physical source. Look at it. Even in this sentence, you will see that you have put gladness in my heart. That means there's a kind of joy that is inward and is induced by God alone without any external influence. And so if God actually want to make you glad and make you joyful, you don't need comedy. You don't need skit. You don't need entertainment to be joyful. Now, a man can be laughing and not be joyful. Yes. So it doesn't mean that everybody that is laughing is joyful, because some laughter are just cover up. They are just facade. They are not real. A man can be burning in his heart and still be laughing, covering up that burn and that hard feeling with his smile. Okay? But David tells us something here. While others do not know any other source of help and they are dejected, David says, you have put gladness in my heart. Everyone who walks with God will see God working in their hearts this way. You have put gladness in my heart. The later part says, more than in the season, that their grain and wine increased. Now, grain and wine talks of merriment, joy, increase, and abundance and prosperity. Because, the seasons when grain increase are seasons of harvest. Farmers have money. Things are going fine. There is increase of grain. Commerce and trade industry is booming when there is such increase. And increase in wine talks of merriment, pleasure, and enjoyment. Now, we seem to have replaced something like this in our days with various kinds of entertainment, especially on the internet. So we have various means where we derive, I would say, happiness. There is nothing wrong in those things. Once in a while, you just want to watch comedy or skits just to relax. That's fine. But there will be a problem if you think that the kind of joy the Bible talks about and the kind of joy only God can give will come from these comedies and other sources of pleasure in the world. No. The same way increased grain and wine could give people joy, a kind of happiness, deep-seated joy that lasts and sustains the soul of a man from the influence of evil. Such joy can only come from God. So the emphasis is this. There is a kind of joy that can only come from God. But the challenge nowadays, and which is typical of the days of David also, is that we try to look for that joy elsewhere. There are certain things only God can give. And until we come into terms with this and allow that to inform the way we progressively and patiently build relationship with God, we will always remain in the same circle. And so entertainment is not joy. Oh yes, entertainment can make you have a sense of relaxation. But relaxation is not enough to sustain a man through life journey. There is a kind of joy only God can give. And David tells us in this verse 7, the first sentence, Psalm 4 verse 7, that you have put gladness in my heart. I say to you once again, God is always in the habit of stirring up joy in the heart of those who follow him wholeheartedly. And that is why you will see, according to Galatians 5, that joy is a fruit of the Spirit. It is the result of the indwelling Spirit in the man born again. Without any external influence, a man can remain joyful all year round without watching a single comedy, because this kind of great joy that is even therapeutic to the flesh can only be found in God. It's a gift. David didn't tell us in this verse that he did anything to get that joy or gladness. No, God put it in his heart. It's a gift. He receives it as a gift. And this is a gift that pervades the heart and prevails over the heart that is constantly seeking the Lord. And so my admonition for you, based on what David is telling us in these Psalms, is that we should cultivate a constant and consistent fellowship with the Lord. That is where the secret is. If you will not be carried away and speak in hopelessness like these people are speaking in verse 6, who are so despair of life that they are saying, who will show us any good? If you do not want to get to that point where you really get hopeless about life, then start building relationship with God today. Don't wait till tomorrow. You need to start now building relationship with God and seeking Him with all your heart. And that is when you begin to see that joy you didn't work for, that joy that you didn't need to watch any video about, or you don't need to stir up from any external source, you will see that joy will be welling up in your heart. It is real. It is experiential also. It's not just there locked away in the pages of Bible. No, it is actually in the heart of the man born again. But many times we don't see the expression of that joy. We don't experience it in a practical sense because we seem to be far from God. Our lives are meant to be designed in such a way that we live in constant communion with God. And this is how the gladness the Bible is talking about, the joy of the Spirit, begin to well up in our hearts and begin to rule our hearts. Look at verse 8. I will both lie down in peace and sleep. We had just talked about the fact that David at this point in time was going through distress. And this same man who is under oppression, who is under attack, says, I will both lie down in peace and sleep. So it talks of tranquility, it talks of rest of mind, it talks of joy, it talks of trust in God. Now, the time when people are passing through issues are the times they are not able to sleep well because they have pent up issues in their heart. But that is not the case for a man born again. The truth is, for the fact that someone is a Christian does not mean that he's not going to have issues. There will always be issues. There will always be circumstances that will be bigger than your strength. But even in the midst of such circumstance, it is possible to be in peace. We said previously that peace is not absence of difficult circumstances. Peace is not absence of storm. Now, how do we know that? Jesus was in the inner part of the boat. There is a serious tempest and there was a serious storm, life-threatening storm. And Jesus was still there sleeping. And so that means that whether good or bad, true peace does not come from circumstances. That is where we miss it. We thought that we have peace when things are going on fine. And so we tend to derive temporary short-term peace from good experiences. You put your hand into something, it became successful, and you tend to have a temporary peace of mind. You attempted something and eventually you got it done and you feel good. And all of those things, they can only give temporary peace. But what we saw in Mark 4, when there was tempest on the sea and the disciples went to Jesus and told him, don't you care that we perish? What did Jesus do? Now, Jesus showed us a great lesson we must take advantage of in this context. Jesus shows us that true peace does not come from outside. No circumstance, whether your possession, your relationships, your children, your achievements, they cannot give lasting peace. So Jesus showed us a great example that peace is actually something on the inside and we exert on our environment. That's what exactly Jesus did. The disciples were living outside in. So what determines their rest of mind and peace of mind is what is happening on the outside. But Jesus shows us that it is peaceful. That storm in Mark 4 was life-threatening enough for Jesus to wake up and panic. Yet, he did not even wake. He didn't even wake up until they wake him up. And it shows us that this kind of peace we're talking about is deposited in your heart. You're not trying to get it from circumstances and people. It is a thing that is deposited in your heart by the Spirit. And so we can enforce that peace also on our environment. The implication is this: the man who does not derive this peace from inside through the Spirit and is trying to get it from circumstances will not be able to enforce that same peace on his environment when the storm comes. Let me say that again. When a man looks outside, he looks beyond the scriptures, he looks beyond the Spirit on his inside, and is scanning around to derive peace. Maybe you have a disagreement with someone, the person comes to apologize, and eventually you have peace. That's fine, but that is not the best of God. you've been at loggerheads with someone, eventually you settled it, and that is when your heart came to rest. Now, it is not good to hold grudges, but I say to you that resolution of conflict is not enough to give a man the right kind of peace he needs. As a matter of fact, it is the man that is conscious of the peace on the inside that can actually engender peace or create peace in his environment and relationships. And so we are saying that the same way Jesus was peaceful on his inside and he exerted that peace on the circumstance, that is the way we can live. Christianity is a life that is lived from inside out. Yes, for instance, the Bible says, let this man be in you, let this attitude be in you. We live from inside out. We live from the Spirit. We are people of the Spirit. We are under the influence of the Spirit. We are not under the influence of the flesh. And so, when David said that I will both lie down in peace and sleep, he is telling us something deep. Very important lesson to learn. Where did he get that peace from? Obviously, from this context, it's not from circumstances, because the circumstances at this point in time was bad. Life-threatening issues. So where did he get the peace from? The last sentence in verse 8 tells us, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. And so, true peace comes from the Lord. If a man is going to have peace of mind and sleep good, physically sleep good, because David actually meant that when he said he slept good. He actually slept good. Not only that, if a man is going to be able to exert peace and create peace in his environment, the same way Jesus looked at that storm and says, peace, be still. If a man is going to be able to do that, then that man must see God as his only source and cultivate fellowship with him. David is so conscious of God. He was so aware of the presence of God and his ability to cause changes no matter how difficult the situation is. And so he acknowledged the fact that God alone made him dwell in safety. How is it possible to see the workings of God even when it is not physically obvious? This is what David is doing here. Because every other thing around him is telling him you are going down. Every other thing around him is spelling distress, difficulty, hopelessness. Apart from the situation he was going through, even the people around him were already saying who will show us any good. Hopelessness. Yet, this man, in that sense, was singled out based on his relationship with God and is able to get that acknowledgement and consciousness of the power of God to keep safe in the midst of challenges. Right? So, this peace, it's better experienced actually than explained. And I encourage you to settle down with the Lord and seek him with all your heart. It is in the midst of this you will see his peace welling up in your heart. Amen.